Welcome to Ceph News at 10. I'm John Schubeck, and this video is all about Ceph Cloud transition to tape for object storage. Let's get right to it. Well, let's take a quick look through the workflow from left to right. You can pause and resume the video as needed to look at the diagram. The end user will create a bucket. Presumably that bucket will have a standard storage class. The end user will then put contents in the bucket, but then they will apply a bucket lifecycle rule set. We're going to demonstrate that live. That bucket lifecycle rule set will say, after a certain period of time, transition or move objects meeting the selection criteria outside of the cluster to some other resource, an on-premises S3 object store, an off-premises S3 object store in the cloud, or possibly even on-premises S3 enabled tape. Wait, what? Did you say tape? Yes, I did. Well, not this kind of tape. More like this kind of tape, the kind of tape library that provides density, automation, maybe even immutability, and most importantly, an S3 access personality. That's what Ceph transition to tape is all about: Glacier flexible retrieval, automation, and potentially even transparent recall. Tentacle says, that's enough theory for now. Let's get on with the live demo. And so we'll start out in the Ceph dashboard. You don't have to do this in the dashboard, but I think it serves as a good way to illustrate the steps for cloud transition. Going to gateways, we see we have Rados gateways running, and moving on now to storage class. There already is a storage class in there, but we're going to create a new one. And when it's tape, we have to say the type is Cloud S3 Glacier. We have to give it our own defined name. It could be the word tape, could be Glacier, could be anything you want. And then the endpoint for my S3 enabled tape library. Of course, we're going to have to write to that tape library using your HMAC keys, or actually the HMAC keys of the library, access key, secret access key. We're going to allow read through. We're going to allow head object, leaving a stub behind, and that target path is a bucket name in the S3 enabled tape library. Moving along to advanced, there's a little bug in my dashboard. It says 32 gigabyte or terabytes is the multi-part size. Well, that's way too big. We're going to crank that down to 32 megabytes. Clicking create, and there we have an entry for a tape tier, which is a cloud transition entry. I like to use the Ceph dashboard to demonstrate ease of use, but ultimately we will find ourselves in the Ceph ADM CLI because there are certain things we will need to do that are not available in the Ceph dashboard. So we'll launch a Ceph ADM shell, go to some Rados gateway admin commands. The first command we need is zone group get. It'll show me all of my tiers, and there is my tape tier. Be careful if you're demonstrating this because the access key secret key for your tape library is displayed in the clear, but that shows all of the tunable parameters for the tape tier as a zone group storage class. You can adjust those or add those at will. Every time you do an adjustment or a change to that storage class, you need to restart the Rados Gateway S3 services, and there is the command to take care of that. Now we're going to move on to the client experience, but before we do, let's create a brand new bucket from the Ceph dashboard for our user experience and our cloud transition to tape demonstration. The bucket name will be Ceph to tape, currently is empty. We'll swing on over now to an S3 client. I happen to like CyberDuck for summary level demonstrations, and we'll go ahead and select a handful of local files to upload into my brand new Ceph to tape bucket. The kind of files I'm going to focus on for the transition rule set will be my image files, JPEGs. And the reason I'm doing this is they tend to be large, they're very easy to demonstrate, and it dramatically shows the space savings, quota relief even, in terms of transitioning out to tape. So there's my data set of files. There are 8 JPEGs in this collection of files. Oh, there we go there. Now we're going to take another view into this bucket through a command line tool. Let's use the MinIO client, MC for short. I happen to like the MinIO client for demonstrations. We'll go ahead and do an MCLS of my Ceph resource. There's a list of buckets. Let's drill down into the Ceph to tape bucket, and we can easily see my 8 JPEGs in the middle of this file or object listing. The next thing we're going to do is set up a lifecycle transition rule for this bucket. First thing we'll try to do is do a get bucket lifecycle configuration. AWS CLI kicks back an error. That tells us there is no configuration file set, right? It's not a container or an iterable. So now we need to take a look at a lifecycle configuration file. I'll call mine tape-transition.json. It looks like this. I'm going to look for any object with a prefix of img, and if it's more than 3 days old, transition it to tape. Now, as it turns out, the Ceph administrator is not blind to this. There's a Rados Gateway admin lifecycle list command that tells us, are any of my buckets enabled with lifecycle? Yep, there's Ceph to tape. Now I can do a lifecycle get on the bucket name Ceph to tape, and Ceph ADM will show us the transition rules that the end user has applied to that bucket. So there's the prefix img. Anything older than 3 days is going to tape. We can see it at the bottom of this listing as well. So this is Rados Gateway Admin LC lifecycle for short. And we are back after a brief intermission, which I conveniently didn't announce ahead of time. What really happened is that time passed. And in that passage of time, we see that a transition has taken place. My JPEG images are still there, but they are 0 bytes. And I can go back through using CyberDuck, do a refresh, and sure enough, they are 0 bytes in CyberDuck as well. Where did they go? Well, to the S3 tape library, of course. Before we do, we can look in the dashboard and see, in fact, there are fewer files and there is less bytes consumed in that bucket. So we're validating now at the Ceph ADM dashboard that we are getting capacity and quota relief, as opposed to a fully constituted no bucket transitions, where we started out at 74 megabytes. We're now down to 39 megabytes after that transition. How do I get these files back, or how would I open or read one of these files? Well, in the world of S3 enabled tape and a cloud transition, this is called a restore object. So there's an AWS CLI command, restore object, selecting object 297. I'm going to reconstitute it for only 1 day, so we'll call it back, but we're only going to keep it for a day. And if I do a head on that object, it says the storage class is tape and currently 0 bytes content length. And we are back from a second intermission. This time, 30 minutes have gone by. Did my recall object work? So we'll go ahead and do a listing. And there we have it. Object 297 is restored, 5 megabytes in length. Let's do a few more commands. But before we do, let's go to the CyberDuck view as well. Do a refresh, and there's my 5 megabyte JPEG object named 297. And if I do a quick look on that object, we will see a beautiful scene from Arches National Park. That's why imagery works so well for Ceph and object storage demonstrations. How about a head object again? All right, we'll do a head object on 297, and we see the storage class still says tape because it's still transitioned out, but the content length is back from 0 when it was transitioned out back to 5.5 megabytes, and it will stay there for that day because that's how long I told Ceph to keep it in the bucket until it is flushed out again. As I said before, we can validate through the Ceph UI that we achieved quota and capacity relief in that bucket. We can also expand the properties of that bucket, moving to a property page called policies. We can see our actual lifecycle rule set. And we can also go to tiering, which again validates, well, okay, within the rule set, where are we transitioning to? In this case, the storage class of tape. And then finally, at the very bottom, no bucket transitioned is a fully constituted bucket, same data set, untransitioned. Finishing up now with a listing of commands used in the production of today's demonstration. Pause and resume the video for yourself. Zone group placement add, zone group get with a listing of storage classes, zone group placement modify, fine-tuning the parameters and configuration settings for our cloud transition. Almost always this is going to be needed. Play it back with a zone group get all storage class configuration parameters. And finally, how do we test this? Danger, be careful. There is a development parameter that can change the clock as it applies to cloud transitions. Pause and resume as you need to. And with that, we close the door on today's session of Ceph News at 10, Ceph Cloud Transition to Tape. I'm John Schubeck asking the question, do you know where your data is? Take care.